Hey, welcome back.
What is going on, my man?
Literally, welcome back, Cory.
Thanks.
That was a TV show, Welcome Back, Cotter.
Hmm.
This is before our time.
My name's Cory.
Yep. So we're in week something of a series on mDNA.
Mm-hmm.
And this week, we're going to look at what we call the Apostolic Environment,
Mm.
or more specifically, focusing on APEST. So quick callback to the last few weeks. We have focused on mDNA number 1, Jesus is Lord, which is our language around return to Jesus in everything and every way. It's a 3-word worldview. It's all about everything comes from and returns to Jesus. Romans 11, whatever the verse is there, from him, to him, and through him are all things. To him be the glory. The second week, we looked at missional incarnational impulse, all 3 of those words. What does it mean to be sent? And then to go deep into that place. And then the impulse that it should be something that is always happening. So our language around that is we are sent to a people and a place until gospel flourishing is everywhere. Week 3 or 4, we had an opening week, so I guess that'd be week 4. Disciple making as the core engine. So we want to be one that can make one, that can make one, that can make one. Want to embrace this command from Jesus in Matthew 28, go make disciples. Last week, we talked about liminality and communitas, not made up words, but as that being the environment where formation happens. So liminality being these harder places that we enter into, these places of challenge, but they become places of formation where there's a depth of community that happens. And this week, we're getting into this apostolic environment. And so this one is all about creating atmospheres where we equip and send. That's really what it's about. In fact, we'll talk about this in a minute, probably. Yeah, we will. I've stopped using the term apostolic environment, specifically because of the conversation we were happening before we started recording about the new apostolic reformation, which is just evil.
Thank you, Apostle Brian, for sharing that.
No.
What'd I say?
But I changed it to equipping and sending environments in some of our documents so that we are clearly stating what we mean by this mDNA element.
Yeah.
But before we go into all that, I about lost my headphones there.
Dude, that was a really fast and efficient summary.
Yeah.
Well done. And I'm totally jet lagged right now, so I don't know what you said, but it's
and for those that skip the first 2 minutes normally because of the light banter,
go back because there was no banter.
Yeah.
It was content.
But
thick, heavy, beautiful content.
If I don't think we should do maybe we should do a whole podcast on it, but it's so fresh in your mind. You just spent a week in Cyprus. You got to hang out with DMM global leaders, disciple making movement global leaders. You got to hang out with theologians. You got to spend a few days with Neil Cole and Alan Hirsch. Alan being sort of the guy that explored this mDNA language first that we're exploring now. Was there anything that was like, oh man, let me talk about like why this stuff matters now?
No.
Okay, cool. Yeah. All right. So
Alan did share, I think episode 1 of mDNA, our intro episode, I think just dropped.
This is the second recording.
The second recording. And that one, I think it just dropped, or it was in the last couple of weeks or whatever. And so he had just done kind of a thorough rundown of mDNA. And these are in the room with, voices from all over the world, talking about the movement conversation and what's kind of coming next. And so I have lots of fun takeaways. It was a really cool time. But it was funny because he shared ours. He's like, here's 2 people talking about it in a funny way that might make more sense. And I laughed about that. I was like, we don't get that accusation much. That'll make more sense after you hear us. It was good, man. It was in summary, and there was lots of good stuff. It was kind of the purpose of this particular gathering was talking about how movements have been, a lot of it has been praxis first, a lot of practice, a lot of what we've seen in the last 30 years is a thorough shifting in the global expression, the face of the global expression of the church. And we've talked about that. This gathering was kind of like, now we're having all these other things come around it that give a little more robust picture of that more normal expression of church. in Christianity than what we've experienced in the last few hundred years, right? So this was like a lot of theological foundations, and like, so there's a bunch of, theologians and professors in the room that are all in on movement, because this didn't start in the classroom.
That's right.
It started on the ground. So, but the classroom is like, oh, by the way, this is what God has done all throughout time. So that was a lot of it, and just talking about some trends and themes and things like that we're seeing in the global church. So by no means was it everyone who's involved in movement at that table, but there was
Sure.
It was a really cool time. And then hanging with Neil and Alan and Matt, it was a really beautiful time just to kind of sit and chew on some of these things. And I'm really excited about what God is doing, not only in Kansas City but in the States. I feel like as things grow and pop and mature, there's a very important conversation about the very thing that we are talking about in this series.
Yeah.
About the DNA of movements and kind of the structural, what holds things together. And a lot of it is around APEST.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like I'm hearing Alan talk about APEST to global church leaders, that although it's present,
right,
they're able to now identify things and be able to actually step into further kind of maturity in a framework where we're seeing, 20, 30 generations of churches and thousands of churches, but be like, oh, this is something that could be a game changer as we move forward. So, hey, if we're looking at movements globally that this could be a game changer for, that are already thousands and thousands of, churches in, at the same time with us here in the States, how can this framework of these five roles and voices and gifts that we see in Ephesians 4, help and permeate all that we're doing in disciple making in the West?
Yeah, and we've talked about APEST on this podcast in the past, and like we say before, we don't really do anything new. We just keep digging deeper in
new way of talking
a few things and trying to do those few things really well, the things that we feel like lead to movement. So I'll give this as a frame, because some of you might be like, oh, here we go on APEST again. And then for us, we're like, that's right.
Yeah, we are.
But I love this little frame. I'll just read it to you. If disciple making is the engine and liminality is the terrain, apostolic environment is the climate control. It's what keeps the whole thing from getting stale. And then APEST, that's how we tune the settings. So we're going to get into a couple of metaphors here.
Like four metaphors there that my brain's trying to wrap around at the same time.
Totally. But it's kind of fun to think through. Again, disciple making becomes the engine, is the thing that we're basing everything around under the lordship of Jesus. Liminality is that space that we get into that's hard. Apostolic environment means that we're keeping it, when we say it's keeping the whole thing from getting stale. The apostolic environment is what is pushing, equipping, moving things at the edges even further. And then APEST being the thing that tunes the settings, mean we're thinking about all five gifts and how it brings maturity to the church. So first thing, you already threw this out there. This is a little snarky thing of Apostle Brian. We do not see APEST. We're going to get more into APEST later. We're going to talk about apostolic environment first, but we do not mean that any of these gifts that Christ gave the church in Ephesians 4 are offices. Yeah. They're not roles. They're not titles that we take on. They're gifts and they're callings. They're the way that we sort of function. So we'll get into those in a minute, but we definitely do not get into a space where we assume that that is their identity, is as an apostle or a prophet or an evangelist or a shepherd. All five gifts are within all of us, because Christ is in us and he embodies all five. We just function probably more healthy in one or two, but just want to call that out first. That's not who we are. Yeah. We are not those people.
We are not. And APEST is not rooted in some hierarchy. And you're basically saying that as well as some title. It's like, so as I say, Apostle Brian, that doesn't mean that you're.
No.
Yeah. In fact, apostles. I mean, dude, I've spent so much time in scripture on this. It was fun being with leaders globally, but I was just looking at the New Testament about leadership and structure and the apostolic ministry. And really the whole argument is, hey, even if we could, lord it over you, Jesus says we don't do that.
Don't.
That's not what leadership looks like, specifically, even if that's what the rest of the world does. And the apostles are known so much by their serving and their sacrificing and their suffering. Oh, that's 3 S's. podcast series coming up, laying it all down.
Write that down.
Laying it all down for others, right? And so within the framework of APEST, like it is so important to have those apostolic voices, to be able to and have that apostolic environment that we're going to be able to talk about in a second, so that things continually move forward. As you know, we could be in a teaching environment, which the church has been in.
Seminaries are, and they're good and important places.
They are,
but they're not producing movement.
No, what it's producing is more teachers and more of the model that we're in, right? And it's good. But what about if we're in an apostolic framework? Then you're like jumping all in on a New Testament thing, where it's going. It's going. God is the unchanging God who's always doing a new thing.
Amen.
Write that crap down too. Yeah. Also, man,
that's a real baby.
But God is the unchanging God who's always doing a new thing. And so it's just like that idea of where does APEST fit into that conversation? Not a hierarchy where this person or this role has all the authority, but it's like we are now in this together. We are a family. We're not like a family. We are a family, and we have these voices. But this framework, and let's kind of catapult into this conversation about apostolic environment. The environment that, if it's apostolic, if it's ascending, if it's a arrows out environment, what does it look like for the rest of APEST? How does that affect what we're doing? How does it continually affect? So even if we start something new, but it's not in that environment, you end up getting things like parachurch ministries. What is that about, Brian? Like, what are we talking about parachurch as if it's not church? We had to create something outside the whatever environment, if it's the teaching environment, whatever framework that we've been sitting in Christendom. We had to literally create new things called parachurch ministries because it didn't fit in the paradigm that we'd created. But now this larger apostolic environment gives space, gives breadth for things like that.
Yeah, which in that paradigm too it's diminishing the identity of the people of God, which is sad and unfortunate. It's a reductionist view of what the church is. We won't get on that soapbox. All right. What is an apostolic environment? So let's talk definition first. What do we mean by apostolic environment? I think you've already kind of dove into that.
There's notes here that's going to be much clearer.
Yeah. So what is an apostolic environment? We would describe it this way: a pioneering, boundary-pushing culture that safeguards and extends the mission.
I'll say that again. That's so good.
An apostolic environment is a pioneering, boundary-pushing culture that safeguards and extends the mission. So the reason we put the safeguard on there first is, if you put it second, it might get missed. It's like, we know that the boundary-pushing culture, the extending the mission, is part of the apostolic gifting, but it's also about guarding DNA. It's also about choosing to say the DNA and the culture matters. The second phrase we put on there is the greenhouse climate that fosters risk, innovation, and sending. Talk about those two. What stands out?
Greenhouse climate that fosters risk, innovation, and sending. So we're talking culture, and we're like, in some ways it feels like this vague framework, but in other ways it feels very like specific here. Like, so if we are in a culture that's always pushing towards joining God on mission, right? Then we're everything that's kind of in it is still in that framework. Sometimes we'll say in that paradigm, and that so it actually doesn't mean that we're throwing all the things that we think of in regards to teaching or shepherding or all these good things that are very present in our other framework, kind of the Western Christendom framework. But now it finds its identity and its role in the mission of God. And so it changes things. But it does. So people always ask us and think, like, what's the role of teaching in a movement? What's the role of a shepherd in a movement? Because we understand that over here, this other framework, we understand the role of the teacher is on the stage. But we don't understand it in a framework of movement. But that's why, like, we have to understand all the voices, and we have to actually be in that framework moving forward for it to make sense. And we realize, this is how teaching is expressed in this setting. This is how it looks in this micro church setting. This is how we help shape and not just be all about the mission, that we care for. This is part of the safeguarding. We care for the people that are going this way, right? So like the shepherd role becomes so unbelievably important in the mission of God, but now it's within that framework of like, we're going and joining him, and it changes it a little bit. So those are my original, my like immediate thoughts.
I'm going to give you some things to riff off of here. When we think about an apostolic environment, using that language biblically about extending the mission, catalyzing new things, cultivating, new works. What we're saying is that for the Kansas City Underground, like our conviction is Ephesians 2:10, all of God's people have a set body of good works. An apostolic environment means our hope is to call out and activate all these followers of Jesus into their set body of good works. Mm-hmm. Jesus prepared these in advance for you to do. He didn't prepare in advance a set body of good works for a few of us that you can come join us in. It says we've been set apart in Christ Jesus. We've been made new in him to do the good things he planned for us long ago. So an apostolic environment is going, all right, how do we cultivate that in every disciple maker so that they're joining Jesus in that way, in that city for transformation? That's extending the mission. That's activating new people. That's thinking multiplication. That's thinking, how do we, if we only do a few of us and only think about a few of us, we're only going to get a very small amount done. Mm-hmm. As we activate all of God's people, it's extending it to all corners of culture, every part of our city. The safeguarding piece, though, for me is saying in an apostolic environment, we have to keep bringing people under the lordship of Jesus. If that environment pushes and says you got a set body of good works, but then some other alternative sort of motivation begins to be the first thing, not what comes because of the lordship of Jesus. And I don't have a good example coming to me right now. But it's like, it's the safeguarding is to continually call people back. Lordship of Jesus, disciple making engine. He's calling us to cultivate disciples who know how to apprentice in the rhythms and the ways of Jesus, not in my rhythms and my ways, not in the things that I think are important, but the things that Jesus thinks are important. So those were, and I know you're passionate about that mission drift piece. That's what I was saying. Like,
I didn't know if I was going to say this, but it's along those lines. I felt like a lot of,
I can delete it if you want.
Okay, cool. A lot of my, not just my role, but that's like, I feel like I've been invited into that is, in Kansas City, as we grow, as we multiply, as we start new things, it is easy to lose some DNA sometimes when we're giving away things all the time. Mm-hmm. But in order to have our DNA, we have to always give away things.
Yeah.
And so institutionalizing things is the death of movement, and institutionalizing is kind of we put a cap on the apostolic framework. We put a roof on it.
Yeah.
And everything we're trying to do is take that roof off so it can
if it has to come through me to be approved, I'll just be really vulnerable here. I've been thinking a lot about this. The last 2 days I've been going, man, if like the people that are going to find disciple making and multiplication the hardest are people that like Enneagram 1s that think about control and think about everything inside the box and think about explainable, and it needs to fit my expectations. Yeah. And I was like, man, Jesus, I want to repent and work out of that. I'm just a control person.
Yeah.
It's something that I have to work through and go, if I can't explain it, it doesn't mean they're not like joining Jesus. Right.
Oh yeah.
But that's hard, because we've been mostly in environments where it's like, if it needs to fit inside this box, if it's a little weird, a little strange, and I hadn't seen it before, I don't know. It's like, man, we have to continually die to that and go, Jesus did a lot of strange things that didn't fit the framework of the Jewish culture.
Right.
And that's like, we have to cultivate that environment for experimentation.
That's so good. Yeah. We jump, through lots of different analogies here.
Yeah,
so I'm going to do that even more.
Pull
so.
us back.
No. It's to take us one step further into the next. It's all, they're analogies that complement one another, but we've used it where we've talked about basically the gardening box in our backyard, which is great, versus like a trellis. And again, I think this fits with those. Like if we can explain it, if we can cap it, if we can keep it in this box, like that's not an apostolic environment. It's an environment that can have some life. So when we talk about these different, wineskins, another analogy, these different paradigms of church, we talk about kind of the Western Christendom paradigm, and then kind of this movement paradigm. That's a good, think of those two images in your mind. Like, we've got this gardening, and there's real things happening, but we can contain it. It's institutionalized a little bit. Like, it's more about shepherding. It's more about teaching. We're settlers. We're not, another analogy. Come on. We're not pioneering new things. Yeah. We're caring for only. Then we've got this other side. It's like, think of this trellis, and then think of the biggest trellis you could possibly think of, right? Because even that analogy at some point has a ceiling. But there's life to continue to grow up. This, like, I saw a picture online of a trellis that basically scaled a building. And, so it's like, it's built, it's natural, it's growing, right? But there was enough to grow on.
Yeah.
Globally, we see that as the relational networks. There's like the strong trellis of relational networks. In the West, we don't see that as much. So we're trying to help shape a little bit of identity so those things can still grow, but we can't contain it. And so that's the apostolic environment, where it's going. How do we cultivate the continued growing? But it's also got to be healthy, right? It can't. It's still, if there's things that are popping up, or there's some dangers, or some weeds. I don't know. This is where my dangerous lack of gardening knowledge comes in. But there's room for the network to be able to address those things. But that's because it's set up for it. It is set up for uncontainable growth. If we try to take tactics and put them in something that it's not set up for, you could see fruit, but it'll be limited. Like, I could take over the entire garden box, but it's limited to that box. Right. So that's why we talked about tools, just putting tools in that environment. It's not the issue. The issue is actually, how do we have that environment? And that's what this podcast is really about.
Yeah. So I think that we've hit, pretty hard. You're hearing the commitment that the Kansas City Underground has to this mDNA element of apostolic environment is we care about cultivating new things. We care about extending the mission. We care about catalyzing new work. You can put whatever phrase, but it's like, let's be curious about what else Jesus is doing. Let's activate every follower of Jesus into their gift, and let's go hard after that. Let's not settle for that.
Curiosity picture. Like, be curious about what God's doing. Let's keep going up. That's good, man.
Now we get into why APEST matters. So, initially we said it's like tuning the settings. So every gift matters. So I think let's just start by reading 11 through 13.
Yeah, it's good.
And then we'll get into those functions. We won't belabor this. We've done a lot of work on APEST. You can find those podcasts, but we will. So this is Ephesians 4, 11 through 13.
There's a Bible here in this podcast studio, and I just grabbed it, and it was marked for Ephesians.
Really? So this is Ephesians 4, 11 through 13. Now these are the gifts Christ gave to the church: the apostles, the prophets, the evangelists, the shepherds, and the teachers. Their responsibility is to equip God's people to do his work and build up the church, the body of Christ. This will continue until we all come to such unity in our faith and knowledge of God's Son that we will be mature in the Lord, measuring up to the full and complete standard of Christ. Now, we could do a whole podcast, and I think we have before, so we won't labor on this. Some people go, well, Paul's only speaking to a very small number of people here. If you read before these verses, he's talking to all of the church. If you read after these verses, he's talking to all of the church. So Alan makes the argument, why would he suddenly stop talking to all of the church? And so
without saying so.
Yeah.
You're right. It's just our
so our conviction is Christ has given this to the body. We've all been given this. We all function in a few, primarily in a few of these. I believe ours are closely aligned, leading with this sort of catalytic apostolic role. Evangelist is kind of second. Teachers probably somewhere in there is third. Shepherding barely pops up on the radar. So let's talk about each of these real fast. Cory, you said this early. Want to hit it again. APEST is about function, not hierarchy. None of these are more important than the other. They just have different roles.
And I like to think of it like so it's not like you said before, right? It's Jesus inside of us. We all can be all of these things.
You have access to all
There's
of it.
kind of primary hats, primary roles, and then even primary things that the word authority is not the right word. But if I'm in
a lot of baggage.
But if I'm in a room, I'm thinking of like our Western Edge hub team, and I'm chilling with you, and I'm chilling with Michelle, who's more of a prophetic voice. I'm chilling with Timmy, who's like the shepherd voice, and Bree, definitely a shepherd. Like, we're talking about things of shepherding. I'm going to look at Bree and say, Bree, you have, I don't know, authority.
You're tuned
in this.
in more into it.
Because this is who you are.
Yeah.
And so I submit, in a sense, my thoughts to the fact that you're better at this.
Yeah.
You hear from God. I can hear from God too. I can take on this role of the shepherd, and I have many times. But this is your native language.
It's a greater strength for her.
Totally. So in that environment, I'm going to use the word authority. Don't let all the weird baggage that comes with it. In that environment, she's got authority in the shepherding voice, at least to me, because this is who you are. This is how God has created you. Same with the other voices. There are people. That's why this team is so important. Yeah. So as an apostolic guy, my first instinct is I want to talk first. Yeah. This framework that's built around the apostle, we get this like super idea of what we are and how important we are or whatever. And the thing is, I'm not actually nearly as good at thinking about teacher, what that role, and I'm going to look to Timmy and Timmy's response to something. I'm going to be like, that's really good. You have authority in a sense. Yeah. You're a leader among equals. This APEST environment to me is like, that's where this functions, not about hierarchy. It's equal. But there are moments of leaders among equal that we can lean on just as we submit to, as a posture of submitting to one another, not as authority, but submission and servant to one another. So that's just how that's how I think about it.
Yeah, that's so good. So if you're like brand new to this, and you're like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Right. These would be the 5 gifts in some very simple definitions. So we could go much further in these. So these are only a few words, but apostles extend and guard the mission. We've already kind of used that language. The apostolics thinking about catalyzing. They're thinking about what's happening at the edges and how do we push that further. They're often thinking, go, 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 go. And there's health and unhealth in all of these. And you can probably hear some of the dangers in it if they're the only voice. Prophets call us to the heart of God. They help us hear how God is speaking, but also calling us back to, man, what is his mercy, his justice, his love? Like, man, we've gotten off track. Like think of those prophetic voices in the Old Testament. Hey, people of Israel, you're blowing it. God set you free from slavery, and now you're enslaving people. What's wrong with you? And prophets can also, they see in creative ways that the rest of us don't always see, and how to return to that heart of God.
I heard Neil Cole this week. He says he talks about prophets in 3 forms. He says often the justice of God, calling out that. Artists, kind of this the beauty, the artistry, and then sometimes, and the last one's revelatory, hearing from God. That's great, yeah. And I thought that was such a great framework for prophets, because it's like, and I says, is that biblical or is that observation? It's like both. We can see that played out in the prophetic voices throughout Scripture. But I just thought that was really helpful. It's like prophetic. If you're someone who's prophetic and you only have the hyper revelatory picture of prophetic, that can be funky. If you're lean more on some of the justice and artists' beauty realities of God. So throwing that out there as 3 things.
Evangelists spread the story. They're the people that are just seem to be more gifted at communicating the good news of Jesus. It just comes so naturally for them. Shepherds, they're the ones that are concerned about the soul of the people. Are we burning out? How do we nurture their souls? How do we just care for them, be with them, be present? And then teachers help ground us in truth. They think systematically. I often say this about teachers as well. Really good teachers take really hard concepts and they make them accessible for us.
That's good.
So, again, we've seen that role primarily in, stage-led, but definitely in an apostolic environment, we need those gifted people that can help take really hard concepts. And sometimes that's going to come in an equipping environment where everybody is together and there's a central voice sort of equipping us in something. Sometimes it's going to come because an equipper, a teacher, knows how to take a really hard concept and put it into a 7-week cohort. and slowly roll something out so we can understand it. So teaching comes in all forms in that way. So
it's good.
Why does it matter for movements? We've already talked about it, but riff a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, I think we see that in the center or the big picture. Okay, this is the framework, Apostolic Environment, and then APEST is, I like that. Tune the settings. Different analogy, but like it helps it run right. It helps it, like, the purity of it, the effectiveness of it is.
I'm going to jump in on that real quick.
Yeah.
Sorry, so I don't lose this.
Yeah.
When you said tune the settings, I thought about one of those old, like, we had
radio.
Yeah, it wasn't not the radio though, but like I can mix the different, like the bass, the mids, the treble, where it's like there are moments where we've done this as a team where we're like, hey, the A is really high right now, and our S is really low, and we need to bring up that bandwidth higher, and we don't need to just bring it up. We actually might need to bring the apostolic voice down a touch. Like, let's stop starting new things for a while.
Yeah.
And we've said, like, in our culture, the T has been low, and it's probably time to push up that bandwidth. Because if you only focus always on extend, then anything that comes up doesn't get nurtured and sustained, and it dies.
Dude, I really think that's an article or a book or something you press into, because I think you're exactly right. You just, APEST is the dials, like on a sound, like a sound box. What am I looking for? Why can't we find words?
It's because we didn't grow up in the 70s.
But even that, you're in the sound booth at the back of at an environment. It's like you see all the little settings. I mean, I'm looking at it right now at ours here.
And we have it right in front of us.
It's really right in front of us. But I love that. Like, you're tweaking that, and that's so. Let me ask you this: talking about the environments and then the tweaking of the settings. I already said it. Now that we're talking about this, what do you what environment or what settings have been turned way high in that environment do you think most people's church experiences have aligned with?
I think the T and the S has been, and there's like the E would follow, but it's basically about inviting so that they can hear rather than activating the E of, like, you've been called to proclaim wherever you go.
So you could see, anyone listening, that you could see the reality of, if we started forming all of our church cultures and expressions around one of those 5 things, you might actually have your own church history might be coming into light in your brain right now, some clarity. It's like, wow, all we ever did. So most of, evangelical churches, the T is way up there. Everything evolves around the purpose, the pulpit. Everything revolves around the pulpit. You might be, there's like definitely prophetic, like, a lot of high, charismatic type of churches in the West, like that. The P is all the way up and the others are way down, and everyone's prophesying all the time. It's not within a framework of mission. There's not a high emphasis on teaching to frame that in necessarily.
Right.
You could have gone to a place where it's just all evangelistic all the time. It's constant rallies. It's constant revivals, right? As I almost dropped the Bible there. And so you can see, wow, the need for these other things. So it's just really interesting that I think part of what has been missing, so much of what's been missing in our Western conversation, is not just an apostolic environment. But both the apostolic environment and the settings of APEST. We can see that in global movements. And that's, like, for the first time I'm seeing this. It was really fun to be in this picture globally with a bunch of leaders. We're seeing this conversation infiltrate movements that are so vast and large globally, to be able to tweak that. There are teams that I've been to a couple different places in Africa, and they actually set their ministry around some role. Each team has roles, and that very much mirrors APEST. But they didn't know that necessarily, and they can grow in some of it.
And they needed a good teacher to help them see it.
And they did, and they needed, so like that's a lot of what Alan and others have brought to some of the table. And then we sit around and we hear movements happening in India. A lot of it was primarily India, Africa, some other places, Southeast Asia, where we're seeing just incredible movement, and to be able to, like, compare, this is what's happening on the ground. Here's some kind of the educational pieces to this. And I was really encouraged, because I feel like in Kansas City, where it's been kind of our story, right? We have, like, we're trying to create this framework, but it's on the backside of disciple making in real places. but it's not, we got it. Like the framework is what's going to help it stick a little bit more. Okay. So then as we're in that, we're like, oh man, but these teams have got to be holistic and healthy.
Mm-hmm.
We can't just have the strong apostolic voice that's going. We're going to burn out.
Yep.
It's going to be ineffective at some of it. Man, well, the hubs that don't have any apostolic voice are probably not going to multiply.
Yeah.
A lot of shepherds, teacher, inward focus. We love them always, but that's probably, okay, they need to tune up the A a little bit, right? So it's just, I feel like this, if you want to stunt the growth and multiplication of the global church, take out the apostolic framework and take out equal voices in the 5 voices.
Yeah.
If you want to stunt the effectiveness of the message of APEST, put it in a framework of hierarchy, right? Taking what should be good, and instead of Jesus saying, no, not with you, this is flat, you're all equal. Yeah, you're all sons and daughters, you know? I heard this recently too. It might have been Neil again. I take a lot of things from Neil nowadays. This dude, he was actually, the role of the head pastor is biblical. Head equals chief, pastor, like equals shepherd. Jesus said, okay, I am the chief shepherd.
Bro, I was like over here, like I'm going to come across, because for the last 2 days I've been talking to people and I've been having that conversation about like, the way that we understand, very calmly, the way that we understand pastors in a role in the church in the West, the New Testament would not have this understanding.
Right.
When you were going, I was like, oh no.
I know.
What's he about to educate
I was kind of
me
trying
on?
to scare you, but when I heard that the other day, I think it was Neil was actually on a different podcast, that it was like, that was so good. Yeah, that's biblical. Jesus. The chief shepherd is Jesus. I personally would be reluctant to take on the role of chief shepherd, head pastor. Yeah. Like, what are we doing? Like, okay, so sorry. Should we move on? Should we sum it up here?
Let's wrap this one up. We're going to give you 4. I was feeling the angst, and I don't want to take you off of it. But we're about 35 minutes in.
We need to bring up the shepherd teacher a little bit.
Here's what we're going to do. 4 practices that shape apostolic APEST culture. We're going to burn through these. I'm going to read one with the bullets. You read the next.
Okay,
how about that?
Bring it on.
Yeah. So, and any light commentary you want to do it. We'll wrap up this way. If you're like, we want to get better in this one, or maybe not better. I don't like better and worse, or bad, good. Let's use healthier, unhealthier. If you'd like to get healthier in this one, APEST awareness and activation, practice number 1, equip everyone to know and name their wiring. If you want to increase your understanding around APEST and increase the functionality of it and how it shapes your culture, equip everyone to know their wiring. You can go to 5qcentral.com, I believe, and take the APEST test there. You can go to fivefoldsurvey.com. Those are just 2 places. Normalize APEST language in teams, microchurches, and leadership development. So we would encourage every microchurch, cultivate that APEST language. Allow it to shape who you are. So if you want to activate it, you have to become aware of it.
It's good. All right, so that was number 1, APEST awareness and activation. Number 2, apostolic functions, cultivating, this is great, restlessness.
I like that one too.
So I mean, not restless, like think of it like the
angst,
the tension I have, the
desire and longing.
I'm created to do this. I hear about this injustice or hear about this thing, and it's like, oh, I got to do this, right? That restlessness, cultivate that, follow that, and we're asking the questions like, where's the gospel not flourishing? Where's the good news of Jesus not present? Let's go. Let's make that happen. If you talk to someone who is stirred to start something,
do it.
Come alongside and do it, right? And we add disciple making and add, we're bring the things together. But man, so I'm walking with a friend who's starting a ministry right now. You're going to hear more and more about it in the coming months, but that involves music with kids who are just, under-resourced in the city, and just and it's like this passion that's been in his heart forever. And now we've got a team of people who are helping think about, cultivate disciple making and movement into that. It's like,
I got a quick story.
Go with that, baby. Too.
Yeah. The last phrase we put on there is "Don't suppress it, send it." Just hearing
send it.
Just hearing McElvain again tell his story yesterday. He goes, "Yeah, I was talking to Cory Osmond. He was like, talking about all this stuff about 0 hour. And he was like, yeah, man, sounds great. You should do it. You should talk to this guy named Brian. And then we got on a Zoom call and I was like, yeah, man, sounds great. You should just do it. And so it's like, that's the kind of culture,
That's
and
good.
now 0 hour is like got teams on like, I don't know, teens campus. That's like 15 or 16 or 18. I don't know.
Yeah.
A lot of high schools in Kansas
doing
City.
incredible things. So yeah, just that don't suppress the restless spirit that people have. I mean, you can mature it and come alongside and but cultivate it.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
Encourage it. Okay.
Number 3, regular rhythms of commissioning. I love this one. We've not been great at it. We're trying to get into it now. And like 15 days from now, 20 days, whatever that is, the beginning of June, we're commissioning 2 new hub teams. Get all of our hub teams together, pray over them, and commission them. But don't just commission hub teams, commission disciple makers. Like we heard your story. You want to get started in that. We're going to lay hands on you, pray over it, fast with you. So commission innovators and starters. Demonstrate to them this isn't for the elite few. This is like normalize regular rhythms of commissioning. Hey, y'all, we want to celebrate this new work. Totally. We're going to pray over it, send it out.
Do it in discovery Bible study environments. Do it in microchurch environments, right? Like send out, intentionally go. All right, now do what we've been doing. You go to those people. It's in you, right? There's excitement. People often just need that permission. Not that we have some authority to give it, but accept in a flattened, familial way. Go.
We
make it
believe
happen.
in you.
Number 4, lastly, innovation spaces plus permission to experiment is the bold that we have.
Too,
innovation spaces and permission to experiment. Design a lab space for trial and error. Like, do you have something specific in mind with that? I've got thoughts, but
I mean, I just think about our Find Your Place. Calling lab that Tampa has done. Like, these are spaces where people can create, cultivate, try some things on and go, this works, this doesn't work. Like, cultivate that environment where people can explore.
Try it out, man. Like different training environments, that in cohorts I've been a part of, and like the lab time. I got that from Novo, always calls it the lab time. Go experiment, try this out, right? And like, dude, let's be a bunch of scientists, experimenting in the lab. Go try it out. What's the worst that can happen? Failure.
And the lab is the real world.
Exactly. Exactly right. Like, so like, go try it out, experiment. If you fail, cool. God teaches us so much.
That's where we learn, not when it's killing it, but when we're maybe being killed by it. So
exactly right. So that was the last one: innovative spaces and permission to experiment.
All right. So we're wrapping up. Just a reminder: Apostolic Environments doesn't mean we raise up super apostles and some weird thing going on with that. It doesn't mean we're raising up heroes. It means we embed a culture of equipping and sending. APEST isn't a theory. It's a framework for unleashing the body of Christ into mission. So next week, we're going to talk about organic systems. It'll wrap up this mDNA series. Hopefully it's been helpful for you in the city to know how we contextualize this, and for those outside the city as you're thinking about cultivating movement where you are. Peace.
Yeah, totally.